Charlemagne, remembered as one of the most powerful and transformative rulers of the medieval world, reshaped the political and cultural map of Europe in ways that lasted for centuries. Born, most likely in April 748, though historians continue to debate the exact year, he emerged from the Frankish Carolingian dynasty, the family that replaced the declining Merovingian kings and established a new era of leadership in Western Europe. He was the son of Pepin the Short, king of the Franks, and Bertrada of Lyon, and from an early age he was raised in a political environment where military leadership, royal authority, and Christian identity were deeply connected. Though much about his childhood remains uncertain, he likely received education in warfare, governance, languages, and religion, preparing him for the immense responsibilities that would later define his life. He grew up in a multilingual world where Germanic dialects, early Romance speech, and Latin all existed side by side, and while scholars debate the extent of his literacy, there is little doubt that he understood the value of learning and intellectual culture. When Pepin died in 768, Charlemagne inherited the Frankish kingdom jointly with his brother Carloman. The arrangement created immediate political tension, as divided rule often produced rivalry rather than stability. The brothers maintained separate courts and spheres of influence, though technically they ruled one kingdom together. Their relationship was strained, particularly during military campaigns such as the conflict in Aquitaine, where cooperation quickly gave way to distrust. This uncertain partnership ended suddenly in 771 when Carloman died unexpectedly, leaving Charlemagne as sole ruler of the Franks. He moved rapidly to secure control, neutralizing potential rivals and ensuring that no competing branch of the dynasty could threaten his authority. This moment marked the true beginning of his independent rule and opened the path for his extraordinary expansion. As king, Charlemagne immediately demonstrated relentless military ambition. One of his earliest major campaigns was against the Saxons, a pagan Germanic people living along the northeastern frontier of his kingdom. What began as border warfare developed into one of the longest and most brutal conflicts of his reign, lasting more than 3 decades. Charlemagne treated the Saxon Wars not merely as military struggles, but as ideological campaigns aimed at conquest, political control, and Christian conversion. Entire regions were devastated, populations were displaced, and resistance was met with extraordinary violence. One of the darkest episodes of his reign occurred at Verdun in 782, where thousands of Saxon prisoners were executed after rebellion. Though historians debate exact numbers, the event remains one of the most controversial moments in his legacy. Yet despite repeated uprisings, Charlemagne ultimately broke Saxon independence and incorporated their lands into his growing empire. His ambitions extended far beyond Saxony. In Italy, Charlemagne became deeply involved in the politics of the papacy and the Lombard kingdom. When Pope Adrian I appealed for protection against the Lombards, Charlemagne intervened decisively. Crossing the Alps in 773, he besieged Pavia, defeated King Desiderius, and in 774 assumed the title King of the Lombards. An extraordinary event in European history, since it meant one kingdom had been peacefully absorbed by another through conquest and political integration. By taking control of northern Italy, Charlemagne became the chief protector of the papacy and significantly expanded Frankish influence in the Mediterranean world. He also campaigned in Spain, Bavaria, and Central Europe. His intervention in the Iberian Peninsula was less successful initially, ending in the famous Frankish defeat at the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass in 778, where Basque forces ambushed his retreating army. This event later became legendary in medieval literature through the Song of Roland. In Bavaria, Charlemagne removed Duke Tassilo, consolidating Frankish power in the southeast. Against the Avars, a nomadic power in Central Europe, his campaigns resulted in major victories that expanded Frankish influence deep into the Danube region. By the end of these wars, his realm stretched across enormous parts of Western and Central Europe, making him the dominant ruler of his age. Yet Charlemagne was not simply a conqueror, he was also a skilled political architect. He understood that ruling such a vast territory required more than battlefield success. He reorganized governance through royal officials, local administrators, legal reforms, and direct royal oversight. He strengthened institutions like the Missi Dominici, royal envoys sent in pairs to supervise justice and administration across the empire. He revised legal codes, imposed oaths of loyalty, and ensured that local power remained connected to the center. His leadership combined military force with bureaucratic organization, helping transform a loose Frankish kingdom into a far more structured imperial system. His relationship with the Christian Church was central to his reign. Charlemagne saw Christianity not only as a personal faith, but as a political force capable of unifying diverse peoples under a common identity. He promoted church reform, standardized religious practices, supported monasteries, encouraged proper clerical education, and sought doctrinal consistency throughout his realm. He held numerous church councils to resolve disputes and regulate ecclesiastical life. His policies helped shape the development of Western Christianity and strengthened the growing distinction between the Latin Christian world and the Greek Christian East. A defining turning point came in the year 800. After political turmoil in Rome, Pope Leo III sought Charlemagne's protection. On Christmas Day, during Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope crowned Charlemagne emperor. This act symbolized the revival of imperial authority in Western Europe more than 3 centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Though historians continue to debate how much Charlemagne planned or anticipated the coronation, its consequences were enormous. He was now not merely king, but emperor, a title that dramatically elevated his prestige and transformed his political identity. The coronation also created tensions with the Byzantine Empire, which still viewed itself as the true Roman Empire. Nevertheless, Charlemagne's imperial status established the ideological foundations for what would later become the Holy Roman Empire. As emperor, Charlemagne entered the most mature phase of his rule. His government became more stable, his court more permanent, and his ambitions increasingly focused on consolidation rather than pure conquest. Aachen became the center of imperial administration, serving as both political capital and symbolic heart of the empire. There he constructed an impressive palace complex and chapel that reflected both Roman imperial influence and Christian authority. Aachen was not simply a residence, it became the physical expression of Charlemagne's vision of rulership. One of his most important achievements during this later period was the cultural and intellectual revival now known as the Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne deeply valued education, literacy, and scholarship, not merely for personal prestige, but because he believed effective governance and proper religious life required intellectual renewal. He gathered scholars from across Europe, including England, Ireland, Italy, and Spain, creating one of the most remarkable intellectual courts of the medieval world. Figures such as Alcuin of York helped shape educational reforms, improve Latin learning, and standardize texts. Monasteries and cathedral schools became centers of learning. Manuscripts were copied in large numbers, and efforts were made to preserve both Christian and classical knowledge. This revival helped lay the foundations for medieval European education and preserved countless ancient texts that might otherwise have disappeared. Charlemagne also paid close attention to family politics and succession. Like many rulers of his age, he sought to secure stability by dividing responsibilities among his sons. His children were given positions of power in different parts of the empire, ruling under his supervision. Pepin governed Italy, Louis ruled Aquitaine, and Charles the Younger held important territories in the Frankish heartland. Yet dynastic politics remained dangerous. One of his sons, Pepin the Hunchback, became involved in a conspiracy against him and was removed from succession, ending his political future. Personal tragedy also marked Charlemagne's life. Several of his wives and children died before him, and these repeated losses deeply affected his later years. Foreign diplomacy became another major feature of his reign. Charlemagne maintained contact with rulers far beyond Western Europe. One of the most famous examples was his diplomatic relationship with Harun al-Rashid, the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad. Their exchanges reflected mutual political interests, especially concerning the Mediterranean and Spain, but they also symbolized Charlemagne's rising international prestige. According to historical accounts, Harun even sent him an elephant named Abul Abbas, a remarkable diplomatic gift that became legendary. Charlemagne also dealt carefully with the Byzantine Empire, balancing rivalry with negotiation. Eventually, Eastern emperors acknowledged his imperial position, though political tension remained. His reign was not free of harshness or contradiction. Though often celebrated as a Christian ruler, Charlemagne could be ruthless when he believed political order or religious unity were at stake. Forced conversions, harsh legal punishments, destruction of pagan religious centers, and brutal military reprisals formed part of his methods. His vision of Christian empire often left little room for tolerance. This duality makes his legacy complex. He was both a patron of learning and a conqueror willing to use extreme violence. Religious policy remained deeply important to him. Charlemagne actively intervened in doctrinal disputes, church administration, and liturgical reform. He sought uniformity in Christian worship and doctrine throughout his territories. Under his leadership, Frankish Christianity became more organized and centralized. He also became involved in theological debates between East and West, including disputes over the wording of the Nicene Creed. These developments contributed to the growing cultural and religious separation between the Latin West and the Byzantine East. During his later years, Charlemagne faced new threats from the north. Danish rulers and early Scandinavian raiders began testing